My king and queen, I was just entertaining your guests.
I'm sure. What message do you bring?
Logic and common sense. You rode all the way from reality for common sense and logic.
Do not be coy or stupid.
Human.
You can afford neither.
Reddit. What makes this nerd think she can speak to me this way?
All the God King
Choofus.
requires is this, a simple offering of
Logic and common sense.
a tokenless
Reddit.
submission to the will.
Choofus. Common sense.
Now that's a bit of a problem. See, rumor has it, the
Exo-C-tards.
already turned you down. And if those philosophers and boy lovers have found that kind of nerve,
And of course, Redditors.
have their reputation to consider.
Logic and common sense.
Madman. You're a madman.
Logic and common sense.
Well, you'll find plenty of both down there.
No, man. This is blasphemy. This is madness.
This is Reddit! This is it, boys. This is the one that matters. DDR4 B-Die versus current gen DDR5. Before we even start, I'm only 500 subscribers away from 10,000. Before we even do anything, scroll down, hit that button. Just do it! So, DDR4 versus DDR5. Now, all the large tech tubers have all been saying that DDR5 is on average about 20% faster than DDR4. Now, I've been saying, no. Since before Alder Lake even came out, I've been predicting DDR4 is going to be the faster one. Do not buy DDR5. Well, today we're going to be testing that out. Again, this video was brought to you by the supporters of the channel. I wouldn't have been able to buy all this stuff and bring this content to you without your guys' support. I don't even know what else to say about that. So thank you for that. Leave a comment down below thanking the supporters that you got to enjoy the content because of them. So today we are only doing the 12900K at 5.2 gigahertz on all cores. For the DDR4 board, we're going to be using the Pro Z690A from MSI, the GOAT board. And for DDR5, we're going to be using the MSI Z690 Carbon. Why is it all MSI motherboards? Well, they simply just won this generation straight up. I'm not buying anything but MSI motherboards for Z690. If you want to know why, go to the video before this one and everything will be explained there. I only buy hardware that's well designed and that wins. I don't mess around with broken shit. So congrats to MSI for winning 3 motherboard generations in a row. They're on a tear. So Z790, I'm going to be buying MSI off the bat again. Links to all these products in the description below if you want to support the channel in some other way at no cost to you. So pretty much we already have the DDR4 numbers from the first benchmark launch day video that I did. All I'm going to do is take those numbers. Those were at 4,000 megahertz RAM at C14 on the memory, and I'm just going to reuse those clips for this one. And then on the right side, I'm going to have DDR5. I got it up to 5650 C36. Now, when it comes to the DDR5, I spent 2 full days tuning the memory. I spent about 30 seconds on the DDR4. Why did I do that? Well, you know, half of it is pretty much DDR5 is actually quite a bit different than DDR4. So like, just learning how to tune it took me about a day, and then really getting into the nitty-gritty took me about another day. And then I also wanted to give DDR5 the absolute best chance that it had to succeed, right? I don't want to, it's up against B-Die, okay? So by the end of it all, I got the DDR4 to 60 gigabytes a second of memory bandwidth and 43 nanoseconds of latency. Now, the latency is kind of broken in IDA. You have to like click it 10 times and it spits out a different nut. It's broken with Alder Lake right now, right? But Out of like 10 tries, 43 was the smallest number that I got, right? And then with DDR5, I got that up to 100 gigabytes a second at 58 nanoseconds. Now, for those of you that are new to the channel or new to the overclocking scene in general, looking for more FPS, you might be asking, why does the DDR4 have so much less latency than the DDR5 when the DDR5 is such a higher memory speed number? Now, ignoring the latency, we have to talk about gears for a second, okay? DDR4 runs in gear 1, which means it runs in 1-to-1 ratio with the memory controller on the CPU. So 4000 megahertz on the memory in DDR4 means the memory controller is also running at 4000 megahertz. Now DDR5 runs in gear 2, which means the memory controller is cut in half on the speed. The memory controller is running at 2800. So the memory controller on DDR5 is running 42% slower. So if you're looking at the latency, the DDR5 is about 35% slower on the IDA benchmark latency number. So it's not exactly 1-to-1, but I also spent 2 days tuning the DDR5. I spent 30 seconds doing DDR4. Pretty much primaries, TRFC and TRFE, done. So with that explanation out of the way, you know what we're getting into. Let's jump straight into the numbers here, and let's see how the DDR5 compares with our DDR4 numbers from launch day. First up, we got the Borderlands unoptimized console port test here. From you guys that remember the previous video, this one is just horrendously optimized, so it's a good test to see what the difference is here. Now, the DDR4 only has about a 5 to 10 FPS increase. You will see some dips here and there on the DDR5, but nothing to really affect the gameplay. So you can consider this one a tie. A 5% victory is not exactly a victory, right? So it's not worth swapping one over the other for 5%. Now, there was an 8% difference on the lows, and you're going to see a lot more of that style of thing going forward here. Watch the lows. All right, Civilization 6, we're doing the turn AI test here. There's nothing really more to say about it. He who can process more AI commands in the smallest amount of time is the victor. Just gonna fast forward here to the results. And absolutely no difference. 1% margin of error. So this one is completely irrelevant. There is no difference when playing Civilization 6 between the RAM. So Crisis, we actually see a much larger deviation in this one. The left one actually becomes desynced from the right because it starts processing faster. So this one is actually about 20 FPS higher in the lows. So this one right here actually shows you that 30% that we were talking about. The lows on the left are almost 30% higher on average, right? So that's the latency kicking in there. All right, Counter-Strike, CSGO. The most useless and probably synthetic one of them all. Spoiler alert, there is no difference in this one, and why would there be? Because the entire game fits in the cache. So let's just go fast forward straight to the results. So 2% difference here, absolutely nothing. Let's move on. Rift Breaker, the built-in benchmark, another one for you RTS fans. This is actually quite a fun game. If you have time, go play it. I actually didn't have time. I played it for about 10 hours. And then once I actually saw the skill tree and the development tree, I was like, okay, this game is too big for me to invest time in. But it is fun if you actually do have the time to invest. It actually looks like the FPS here is nearly identical. So I'm just going to go ahead and assume that it fits in the cache in this one as well. So let's go fast forward to the results. And literally exactly the same. So run-to-run variance here, margin of error, completely identical between the FPS. I don't even know what to say. Okay, so by this point I was thinking like, all right, None of this is adding up. How is DDR4 only faster by like 2%? It's literally within margin of error in all these games, right? So I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. How is it that the latency on DDR4 is 35% faster, but the FPS is nearly identical on both of them, right? I was thinking like DDR5 does have kind of a quad rank thing going on, but that still doesn't make up for a 35% latency difference, right? So then I'm thinking, okay, maybe these games are just extremely cache dependent and the CPU itself is completely taking the memory system out of the equation. Kind of like how Ryzen does it, right? Large cache pool, the game fits in the cache. That's why the FPS is so consistent between both platforms. So then I was like, okay, let's go throw in some single player games in there. So you can pretty much safely say that in older titles and real-time strategy titles or things that fit in the cache, no discernible difference between DDR4 and DDR5. I should say actually tuned DDR4 and tuned DDR5, okay? So let's go see what happens with some single player AAA titles. All right, Shadow of the Benchmark. Now, this game is like the synthetic equivalent of a AAA game. It scales with absolutely everything that you throw at it. So if DDR4 or DDR5 does have a difference here, theoretically, I was thinking that this game should show it up, right? This game scales with core counts, it scales with latency, and it scales with bandwidth. So this should be a very, very, very good result. But you know what the interesting thing is, though? It kind of feels like we're grasping at straws here a little bit because nobody plays, you know, Tomb Raider. Nobody plays this damn game. Nobody plays Counter-Strike at 2000 FPS. It's like, I don't even, like, you know what I mean? It feels like we're grasping at straws here just to find some sort of difference. But you can see here, actually, that the DDR4 is maintaining an average, a higher average FPS as it's going through the trees and the shrubbery, right? There is that physics latency happening again, same with Crisis. So we're kind of starting to see a little bit of a trend here with foliage and destructibles and physics and that kind of stuff. All right, spoke too soon here. There's literally no difference at all between these two. Oddly enough, the DDR4 had a higher maximum by about 20 FPS, which is odd because you would think that the bandwidth would be helping the maximums. I don't know. I don't even know anymore, man. But yeah, just consider this one another nothing burger. Horizon Zero Dawn. This is another one of those unique titles that scales with everything that you throw at it, but it also tends to favor AMD hardware and AMD graphics cards because it's a console port. So I was thinking maybe this game might give us a unique perspective, or maybe it might show some differences here. Again, by this point, I was just starting to grasp at straws to just find anything, anywhere where there might be a difference in one of these titles, right? And hallelujah, we have a difference. We have a confirmed handed win for the DDR4 side. This game actually showed an 11% on average victory for the DDR4 RAM sticks. So far, out of, what was it, 7 games? Out of 7 games, we have 5 ties and 2 victories for the DDR4 so far. Unless you do count Borderlands as a victory for DDR4, it was consistently higher. It just wasn't 10% higher. So it could be 3 victories or 2 victories, but consistently overall, it's there. Gears 5 is next, and why this game? Well, I have Xbox Game Pass now, so I figured, hey, let's throw this in there, right? Why not? So apparently this game is one of the most well-optimized games that was like ever created in existence, right? So again, I chose this one because I figured maybe it might be able to show some difference between the 2 memory standards. I never actually played this game though, but I think it had really good reviews. I might even give it a shot. I think it supports co-op too. And another nothing burger. Another tie, maybe a little bit higher on average for the DDR4, but yeah, this is totally irrelevant. This is actually becoming the most anticlimactic video ever. Alright, how about Forza, another Xbox Game Pass? We've never done racing titles on this channel before, so maybe this one, right? I don't know anything about this game. I'm not a racing car driver player, so thankfully this game just has a built-in benchmark. I just matched up the settings on both of them, clicked the button, let it do its thing, and recorded it. So let's go fast forward and check out those results. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Da, 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 da. What it is a good for? Absolutely nothing. Huh. By this point, I'm like, holy crap, DDR5 is performing really well for what it is. It doesn't, on paper, it's not making any sense what's going on here with DDR5, right? But you also just can't compare DDR5 and DDR4 apples to apples. They are, you can kind of consider them different architectures, right? But it seems like the speed on that memory controller is kind of irrelevant in a way. Do you know what I'm saying? Like even though it's running at 2600 megahertz, it's not impacting the performance at all. Is the cache really that important? Well, my friend, let us go to Warzone. The almighty bench zone, the tiebreaker, the god of all benchmarks, he who scales with everything that you throw at it, Warzone. Let's go. All right, we're gonna start off with the road course test. So these kind of look almost identical. The DDR4 one is about 10 FPS higher on average. So that's not gonna it's not gonna make you a better player by any means whatsoever, but at least this game does show a difference, so that's something, right? It's also not really worth an upgrade to DDR5 from a 10900K. If you go back to the previous video, those numbers on the right for FPS are pretty much identical to an overclocked 10900K. All right, the Plaza is next. Let's do the loop and see what the ultimate lows test has to say about these memory standards.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Oh, that was a big dip. It's only 10 FPS, but hey, it dipped below 200, didn't it? That's a win in my books. Maintaining a low of 200 in Warzone has become its own rite of passage for overclockers. Okay, so in Warzone, the lows are better on DDR4, but only by 10 FPS, right? We had a 201 versus a 191. That's 5%. And then on the road test, it was also 10 FPS, 5%, right? So how is so something still isn't adding up, right? How do you have DDR5 with almost 90% more bandwidth, means nothing, and then you have DDR4 with 35% less latency, which doesn't seem to scale either? So you have two ends of the spectrum and neither one of them are scaling properly with each other, right? So what is it about this architecture that has it has some kind of wall on either end? You know what I'm saying? Actually, I might have to revisit this and do a latency scaling wall. Like, do you know how when you're tuning Comet Lake, right, when you get to about 39 nanoseconds on a 10900K, anything beyond that doesn't really give you an FPS boost, right? I'm sure Alder Lake has something similar. Maybe it's at like 45 or 46 nanoseconds. When you get past that point, there's no more FPS increase. Also, the differences might have shown up more if I ran it at 5.3 or 5.4 gigahertz, right? To let the legs stretch out a bit more. But at 5.2 gigahertz, It's a nothing burger. It's super weird, right? So, tuned DDR5 performs way better than I thought, but DDR4 is still the better platform to go with right now. The next thing that people are going to say in the comments down below, right, is, what about when faster DDR5 kits come out? But that's what I'm saying, right? If you look at the bandwidth of DDR5, that's not getting it any more FPS, right? Like that has its own wall, right? Latency has its own wall as well. But theoretically speaking, we need a DDR5 8000 kits to match the latency of what DDR4 is doing right now, right? On the memory controller, I want to say, if you want to compare it 1-to-1. So an 8000 megahertz DDR5 kit will run the memory controller at 4000 megahertz. Then you get the best of both worlds. You got the bandwidth and the latency and all that good stuff. And there's no compromises, right? Right now, if you adopt DDR5, you're compromising on the lows and the latency. Now, the other question is, some people in the Discord are like, okay, what if I buy a 5000 DDR5 kit right now, and then what happens when those 8000 kits come along? I can just upgrade to it. We don't know when those 8000 kits are coming out. We have no idea how long that's going to take. The general rule of thumb is to not adopt a new platform or standard, like DDR5 is a standard. Do not adopt a new standard until it's been out for about 2 years. That's just like, history always repeats itself, right? So it will probably take a year or two before we actually see good DDR5 8000 kits. Now, the other point is, there are no motherboards like DDR5 ones right now that actually support 8000 megahertz. They can't validate it, right? There are no kits for them to validate on. So maybe a Unify X or an Apex might be able to do it, but again, even those boards are only advertised for 6400 or something like that. So if you buy a DDR5 board right now, expecting 8000 to come out later, you don't know when 8000 is coming out. The board does not have a QVL list for it, qualified vendor list, does not have it supported. By then, you don't know what platform we're going to be on. Are we going to be on Raptor Lake or the one after that? We might even be 2 generations after for when that 8000 kit comes out. We also don't know how the memory controllers on those other platforms are going to scale. There's too many unknowns. DDR4 is a known. That's what I'm saying. That was my argument the whole time before this whole thing even came out, right? Right now, tuned DDR4 is faster, and it will be faster for the remainder of the Alder Lake generation. The Z690 platform, tuned DDR4, will be faster. Now, when Z790 comes out, maybe they might have some motherboards that support 8000. Maybe Raptor Lake will support 8000. We don't know. That's all just speculation at this point, right? So, but right now, DDR4 is the GOAT, and it's cheaper. So if you do have DDR5 on you, go scalp that shit. That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm going to be selling my DDR5 kit right now for double the money that I paid for it. The guy buying it doesn't know any better. Me, I'm laughing all the way home to the bank because I know the DDR4 is faster. On most DDR5 boards, you do get 2 PCI Express 5.0 slots. I'm not aware of any DDR4 boards that have that. But if you do need that extra PCIe Gen 5 slot for whatever reason, then don't feel upset that you bought DDR5, because it's literally 5% behind. Anyway, guys, that's it for this one. The large tech tubers were wrong again. If you enjoyed the content, hit that subscribe button, comment down below thanking the supporters for being able to buy this for me. And if you do enjoy the content, make sure to hit that button. We are at 10,000, baby. We're going to keep going until the large tech tubers find out that people are sick and tired of their just terrible reviews. Just terrible. Anyway, see you guys in the next one.